The chandelier light was warm, golden, soft enough to flatter everyone. My father raised his glass. "To our successful child," he said proudly, resting his hand on my brother's shoulder. Applause filled the living room. Crystal glasses clinked. Laughter followed. My mother dabbed her eyes like this moment had been inevitable. I stood near the back, holding a folded napkin in both hands. No one looked at me. No one ever did during speeches. My father continued. "We invested everything in his future, and look at him now." Invested. The word settled in my chest like something heavy and familiar. Have you ever felt erased in a room full of people who think they're celebrating family? Across the room, my brother's fiancée turned slightly and met my eyes. Recognition flickered. She knew me, and my father had no idea. When I was 17, my father told me girls didn't need degrees. We were sitting at the kitchen table. The smell of lentil soup still hung in the air. My brother's acceptance letter to medical school lay open between us, thick paper with embossed lettering. "We're taking out loans," my father said proudly. "But it's worth it. He'll be a doctor." I smiled at my brother. He looked nervous and excited all at once. Then my father turned to me. "You don't need all that," he said. "You'll get married. A degree is optional." Optional. The word echoed quietly. I remember tracing the edge of the table with my finger, trying to keep my face steady. My mother added gently, "Why struggle? Let your husband provide." Struggle. As if learning was a burden. As if ambition was unnecessary for me. Have you ever noticed how limitation is often delivered as protection? That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. The fan hummed softly. Outside, a car passed, headlights sliding across my bedroom wall. I wasn't angry yet. I was awake. The next morning, I applied for scholarships without telling them. I filled out forms at the library. I wrote essays during lunch breaks at school. I met with a guidance counselor who quietly told me, "You're capable of more than you're being told." That sentence stayed with me. When acceptance letters arrived months later, I didn't ask my parents for tuition. I asked for permission. My father laughed lightly. "If you insist," he said, "but we can't waste money. Your brother needs it." Waste. I nodded. I started working that summer, then the next, and the next. 4 jobs at one point. Early mornings at a coffee shop, afternoon tutoring, night shifts at a clinic front desk, weekend retail. Sleep became optional, but purpose wasn't. I learned to study between customers. I memorized anatomy terms while restocking shelves. I read textbooks on the bus. No one clapped for those moments. No one introduced me as anything. Have you ever built something quietly because you knew no one else would fund it? Every time tuition was due, I paid it. Every time exhaustion crept in, I remembered the kitchen table. Optional, waste. Girls don't need degrees. My brother would call occasionally from medical school. He complained about long rotations, about difficult professors, about stress. My parents listened carefully, sent care packages, transferred money when he needed it. When I mentioned being tired, my mother said, "At least you chose this." Chose? As if choice erased inequality. Years passed. I graduated summa cum laude. The ceremony was small. I didn't invite many people. My parents came late. My father shook my hand briefly and said, "You've always been determined." Not proud, not impressed, just determined, as if resilience was a personality quirk. I didn't argue, because by then, something inside me had shifted. I wasn't studying to prove them wrong anymore. I was studying to build something they couldn't take credit for. And I did. Medical school wasn't an option for me. So I found another path. Clinical research, patient care, long hospital corridors that smelled faintly of disinfectant and overbrewed coffee. I worked my way up slowly, one certification at a time, one exam at a time. No one sponsored me. No one introduced me as our investment. But patients remembered my name. That mattered more. During my 3rd year working at the hospital, I met her, a young woman in her 20s, smart, composed, anxious in a way she tried to hide behind politeness. She'd come in with a complicated diagnosis that required careful monitoring. I was assigned to her case. I remember the first time she looked at me with relief. "You explain things clearly," she said. "Thank you." It was a small sentence, but it landed differently than any praise I had received growing up. Have you ever noticed how validation from strangers can feel more genuine than approval from family? I followed her case for months, guided her through treatment adjustments, answered late-night messages when she panicked about symptoms, helped her understand options without overwhelming her. Professional, steady, focused, she improved, gradually. The day she was cleared, she hugged me. "Someday," she said, "I hope I make you proud." I smiled. "You already have," I replied. At home, my brother's career was becoming the family headline. Residency updates, fellowship interviews, photos in white coats posted online with captions about dedication and sacrifice. My parents loved telling people how much they had invested, $170,000. They said the number often. It sounded like proof of belief. No one mentioned the cost of my independence. Have you ever wondered what your path might have looked like with equal backing? I didn't dwell on it. Resentment is heavy. It slows you down. Instead, I built. I saved aggressively. I attended conferences. I networked quietly. I took additional certifications while working full-time. I learned financial literacy the hard way, through trial and careful research. There were nights I cried from exhaustion, but they were private tears. No one needed to witness them. Years passed. My brother became a licensed physician. My parents hosted a celebratory dinner. During the toast, my father said, every sacrifice was worth it. I wondered briefly which sacrifices he meant, the loans or the daughter who funded herself. But I didn't ask, because by then I understood something important. Their definition of success was visible. Mine was structural. It didn't shine under chandeliers. It strengthened foundations. And then came the engagement party, the golden light, the applause, the speech, our successful child. And across the room, standing beside my brother, was the former patient who once thanked me for explaining things clearly. Recognition in her eyes, surprise, and something else, respect. She excused herself from the circle of guests, graceful, composed, and walked toward me. Up close, I could see the same calm intelligence in her eyes that I remembered from the hospital room. Only now, she was dressed in a soft blue dress, a ring catching the light on her finger. "You're Dr. Malik," she said quietly. I shook my head gently. "Clinical specialist, but yes, it's good to see you." Her expression shifted from surprise to something warmer. "I never got to properly thank you," she said. "You changed my treatment plan. You caught something my previous provider missed." Her voice carried just enough volume that a few nearby guests turned their heads, including my father. Have you ever felt the room tilt slightly without anyone realizing it? My brother approached, smiling proudly. "Do you two know each other?" he asked. She nodded. "She was part of my care team, one of the best professionals I've worked with." The word best lingered in the air. Not dramatic, just factual. My father stepped closer. "Oh," he said lightly, "she's always been hardworking." Hardworking, not brilliant. Not accomplished, just hardworking. The familiar downgrade. I held her gaze and smiled politely. Professional boundaries still mattered. I didn't elaborate. And I didn't list achievements. I didn't correct titles. I didn't need to. Because she did. "She led my case reviews," she added. "Honestly, I credit her with preventing complications." A small silence formed. My brother blinked. "You never mentioned that," he said to me. You never asked, I replied calmly. Have you ever realized how invisibility is often maintained by selective curiosity? My father cleared his throat. Well, he said, trying to regain footing, we're proud of both our children. Both. The addition felt recent. My brother's fiancée turned slightly toward him. She's exceptional, she said. I told you about the specialist who helped me through that phase. That was her. Recognition dawned slowly on my brother's face. He remembered the story. He had just never connected it to me, because in our house, our narratives rarely overlapped. He was the investment. I was the determination. Two separate tracks. Until now. Have you ever watched someone reconcile a story they were told with the reality in front of them? My brother's expression softened. Why didn't you tell us you were leading cases like that? He asked. I thought about the kitchen table. Girls don't need degrees. I thought about the 4 jobs, the night shifts, the graduation handshake. You didn't seem interested, I said gently. No accusation, just truth. The music resumed. Conversations restarted, but something subtle had shifted. My father didn't raise his glass again. He didn't repeat the phrase, our successful child. Instead, he watched, observed, calculated, as if a narrative he had invested in heavily was encountering unexpected data. And the most surprising part? I didn't feel vindicated. I felt calm. After that moment, the party continued as if nothing had happened. Music played, plates were refilled, laughter rose and fell in soft waves. But I noticed the small shifts. My father's hand no longer rested possessively on my brother's shoulder. He stood slightly apart, listening more than speaking. My mother smiled, but her eyes flickered toward me more often than usual. Awareness had entered the room, and awareness is quiet. Have you ever seen someone rethink a story they've told for years? My brother's fiancée stayed near me for part of the evening, not in a dramatic show of loyalty, just conversation, professional curiosity, shared experiences. But you made everything feel manageable, she said softly when we stepped near the balcony doors. I didn't know you were his sister. I smiled. It doesn't come up often, I replied. That was true. My career had always existed in a separate compartment from family narratives. At home, I was the determined daughter. At work, I was the specialist trusted with complex cases. 2 identities. Only one was acknowledged publicly. Inside, I felt something unexpected. Not triumph, not anger, a distance. The need to prove anything had faded years ago. Tonight simply confirmed what I already knew. Their recognition was optional. My competence wasn't. Have you ever realized that the moment you stop seeking validation is the moment it starts appearing? My father approached me later in the evening. He held a drink he wasn't really sipping. I didn't know you were leading case reviews, he said. You didn't ask, I repeated gently. He nodded slowly. I suppose we focused a lot on your brother. Focused. Another softened word. 17 years old at the kitchen table. Girls don't need degrees. The memory no longer burned. It felt archival. We thought he needed more support, my father continued. I understand, I said. And I did. What I understood now was this. Support given to one child isn't automatically wrong. Support withheld from another creates imbalance, and imbalance leaves marks. My mother joined us quietly. Deanna, we're proud of you too, she said. The word too lingered. I studied her face. She meant it, but meaning something late doesn't erase the early silence. Still, I didn't reject it, because pride, even delayed, is better acknowledged than denied. Have you ever accepted a late apology without demanding it be louder? My brother came over last. He looked thoughtful. I never realized, he said. You carried a lot on your own. Yes, I replied. He hesitated. I'm glad you did, he added softly. You're incredible at what you do. It wasn't defensive. It wasn't competitive. It was sincere. And that surprised me most. The hierarchy we grew up in had benefited him too. He had simply never examined it. Until tonight. The party began winding down. Guests collected coats. Glasses were cleared. As I stepped outside into the cool night air, I felt something solid settle inside me. Not superiority, not revenge, completion. For years, I had worked to build something they couldn't measure in tuition dollars. Tonight, that work stood quietly in the open. No announcement required. And for the first time, my father didn't introduce only one successful child. He just stopped speaking in singular terms. The next morning, my mother called, not to clarify something about the engagement, not to discuss guest lists or venues, just to talk. Her voice was softer than usual. I didn't sleep much, she admitted. I sat at my kitchen table, sunlight falling across a stack of patient files I needed to review later. Neither did I replied. There was a pause. We thought we were being practical, she said finally. Your brother's path was expensive. Yours seemed flexible. Flexible. Another word that had carried weight for years. Have you ever noticed how practicality is sometimes just preference dressed up politely? You told me girls didn't need degrees, I said quietly. She exhaled. Mare, we didn't think you'd take it so far. Take it so far? 4 jobs, night shifts, scholarships, summa cum laude, clinical leadership. So far. I didn't take it far, I said calmly. I took it seriously. Silence. No raised voices, no defensiveness, just space for truth. My father got on the line next. I spoke too confidently last night, he said, about success. It wasn't quite an apology, but it was acknowledgement. Success had always been measured in tuition receipts and ceremony announcements in our house. What they hadn't measured was sustainability, the cost of endurance, the strength it takes to build alone. Your brother needed support, he added. And I didn't? I asked gently. He didn't answer immediately. Have you ever asked a simple question that forces someone to reconsider their entire logic? I suppose we assumed you'd manage, he said. And there it was. The assumption. That competence requires less care. That resilience eliminates the need for investment. It doesn't. It simply masks the impact. I managed, I said, but that doesn't mean it was fair. Fairness isn't always equal dollars. It's equal belief, equal encouragement, equal introduction at a party. That afternoon, my brother texted me separately. I didn't know they said that to you, he wrote. I believed him. Favoritism often shields the favored. I'm not upset with you, I replied. I am, he said. That surprised me. I benefited, he continued. I didn't question it. Have you ever realized that growth sometimes requires confronting the comfort you stood on? He asked if we could meet for coffee. When we did, he looked different, less certain, more reflective. You're brilliant, he said plainly. And I should have noticed sooner. I studied his face. There was no rivalry in it, no defensiveness, just awareness. Awareness is uncomfortable, but it's necessary. I didn't need you to notice, I said gently. I needed you to see. And for the first time, I think he did. After that week, something in our family dynamic recalibrated. Not dramatically, not with a big announcement, just quietly. My parents started asking about my work in specifics. What kind of cases are you reviewing now? How does that process work? Is that a leadership role? They weren't pretending anymore. They were learning. Have you ever noticed how curiosity feels different when it's genuine? I didn't flood them with achievements. I didn't list awards. I answered calmly. Because I wasn't trying to rewrite history. I was allowing them to see the present. My brother called more often too. sometimes for advice about a complex case, sometimes just to talk. The hierarchy that once felt rigid had softened, not erased, but softened. And that mattered. One evening, my father stopped by unexpectedly. He stood awkwardly in my doorway, hands clasped behind his back, like he was visiting someone important. "I've been thinking," he said. I waited. "We invested money in your brother, but you invested belief in yourself." He said it slowly, as if testing the weight of each word. Belief. That was the piece that had always been missing. "We were wrong to dismiss you," he added. There it was. Not loud, not theatrical, but real. Or have you ever waited years for a sentence you didn't even know you needed? I didn't cry. I didn't rush to comfort him. I nodded. "I know," I said. And I did, because I had made peace with their limitation long before they acknowledged it. The engagement party had not been my revenge. It had been a mirror. They saw what they had overlooked, and I saw what I had built. That night, after he left, I stood by my window watching the city lights flicker on one by one. Well, I thought about the kitchen table, about the envelope of silence around my ambition, about the 4 jobs, the exhaustion, the quiet graduation. And I realized something important. None of it had been wasted. Have you ever noticed how struggle refines you when it doesn't break you? I wasn't grateful for the inequality, but I was grateful for the discipline it forced me to develop. Independence without bitterness, success without spectacle, strength without applause. A few months after the engagement party, my brother's fiancée invited me to coffee. Not as a doctor, not as a family obligation, just as herself. "I'm glad it was you that night," she said softly. "When I saw you, I felt safe. Safe." That word stayed with me, because for years, I had not felt safe in my own ambition. Safe to want more, safe to pursue more, safe to expect fairness. Have you ever realized that your presence might be the quiet proof someone else needs? She told me she admired how I carried myself at the party. Calm, measured, unshaken. I smiled, because what she saw as calm had once been survival. Growth has a way of disguising its origins. My brother joined us later. He spoke differently now. Not about prestige, not about salary, about purpose. "I used to think success was just about titles," he admitted. "Wait, now I think it's about impact." He looked at me when he said it. Not competitively, respectfully. My parents, too, began shifting. My father stopped introducing my brother as our successful child. He started saying, "Our children have built impressive careers." Plural. It seems small, but language shapes perception, and perception shapes legacy. Have you ever waited to hear your name spoken with equal weight? The first time he said it publicly, at a small family dinner, I didn't react. I simply sipped my tea. But inside, something settled. Not validation, not revenge, resolution, because I no longer needed their recognition to confirm my worth. Their recognition had simply caught up to reality. There's a difference. I often think back to that engagement party, to the moment my father proudly announced success without knowing the room held quiet truth. If I had reacted defensively, loudly, emotionally, it would have shifted the spotlight. But silence gave truth space to surface on its own. Have you ever noticed how dignity disarms more effectively than confrontation? My journey was never about proving my brother wrong or embarrassing my parents. It was about refusing to shrink, refusing to accept ceilings that weren't mine. They had invested $170,000 into his education. I had invested belief into mine. Both required effort, but only one required self-conviction. Years ago, when they told me girls didn't need degrees, I could have internalized it. I could have adjusted downward. I could have chosen easier expectations. Instead, I chose effort. 4 jobs, long nights, scholarships, graduation honors, leadership. And not once did I announce it loudly. Because the work was never for applause. It was for alignment. Alignment between who I was and what I could become. Now, when I walk into family gatherings, I don't carry tension. I carry presence. There's no comparison anymore, only coexistence. Yeah, my brother practices medicine. I lead in my field. And my parents have learned something quietly powerful. Investment isn't only financial, it's emotional. And sometimes the child who receives less money builds more momentum. If this story resonates with you, if you've ever been underestimated or overlooked, take a moment and reflect on your own path. What ceilings were placed above you? And which ones did you quietly dismantle? Strength doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it studies. Sometimes it works double shifts. Sometimes it sits calmly at a party and lets truth introduce itself. And sometimes it waits, not for permission, but for timing. This wasn't revenge. It was reclamation. Reclamation of voice, of space, of identity. And this was just the beginning of my quiet strength. If this journey felt familiar, share your thoughts below. I read every story. What would you have done in that room?